The first step in developing a web page, after you have identified what your purpose and objectives are, is to develop sections to contain the content. And as you see here in the JProp shop, we have different sections containing different types of content. Now, how these sections are displayed is the job of cascading style sheets, and we will start looking at style sheets soon. But for now, it is important to recognize the different sectional elements that HTML provides for us, such as a header for containing information that would usually be found in the top of the document, the article section, which can be used multiple times, the section section, which can contain articles and other elements. We have a section for an aside, a footer, and also a nav, which is not seen here. So if you look at the code, we start writing our HTML document and start laying out our sections. Then we will start putting content inside the sections. Remember, the style will be applied later. So here we see the HTML doc type, our opening HTML tag, our closing HTML tag, our head section, and our body section. Let's take a look at how some of this code might be written and used, in addition to some other elements covered this week. I am looking at in the Coffee Cup free HTML editor, and there is information on Blackboard about this free editor. And I am in the code editor mode, and here I have started with my HTML code. I have my doc type, my opening HTML tag, my head section, my body section, and I have some sectional elements. If I were to next add some information, for example, inside my header element, I might possibly start out with an H-group tag. Now, an H-group tag is used to contain 2 or more heading tags. Not to say that you have to use an H-group to use a heading. HTML gives us the additional grouping elements. For example, an H-group tag is a grouping element. Our heading tags are grouping elements. We have 6 heading tags. And if I were to preview in my editor, you can see how the different heading levels render in my default browser, which is Firefox. Now, notice these are block level elements, which means that there is a margin on top and a margin on bottom. I do not need to insert any kind of line break. As soon as my ending tag is inserted, I move down to the next line in the editor when the information is viewed. So we have 6 heading level tags that is used to indicate that the content is of a heading nature. So we have hypothetically put this information into our header element. Now let's take a look at adding some more content. So here we have our header element, and I have 2 heading tags. Next, I will add a section element. So here's my opening tag and my closing tag. Inside, I will place an article. Notice in my article, I will have a heading, and I will also have a paragraph. Here again, you can put whatever you want inside your article. This is just a container for information, which will be styled with style sheets later. So if I were to preview what I have so far, here is my heading 1 tag, my heading 2 tag. This is my article, and there is a H2 tag and a paragraph. When I look at the output in the browser, it doesn't really look like anything because we haven't styled anything yet. But this is how we pretty much start off. And I recommend writing a little bit of code and then testing. It is very easy to omit a slash sometimes, and everything all of a sudden looks crazy because one character could be out of place. So it's a good idea to write and test, and it's also an excellent idea to test in different browsers because different browsers may show the mistakes differently than others. So let's add some more content. Here is my section. Inside my article, I have a paragraph. Now I will add a block quote. So when I preview, here is my block quote. And remember that a block quote is indented from the left and from the right. It is a block level element. A paragraph is a block level element, meaning that there is margin on the top and a margin on the bottom. A block quote has margin on the left and on the right also. Okay, finally, let's add a footer. So here I am back to my original document. I will scroll down, and after my ending section tag, here I have my footer. And inside the footer, I will use an address tag. You generally see things like contact information in a footer. And when I preview, here is my footer, and my address tag, as you can see, displays in an italic type. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these new HTML elements one by one. Okay, let's start with the paragraph tag. And notice I have a lot of information here in my paragraph. One thing I like to do in order to learn how the elements work is on top of the element, especially if it's a block level element, I like to write, this is the top, and after the ending tag, I like to write, this is the bottom. That way we can get a better feel for how this element interfaces with the rest of the content. So if I preview, here is my paragraph. And as you can see, it goes on and on and on. And this is what we mean by a block level element. It means that there is a margin on the top and on the bottom. So whatever is on the top, there is a margin between that and the paragraph. So I don't have to use any kind of line break. And if you notice, white space is ignored in my document. If I were to change this to the pre-tag, which stands for preserve or pre-formatted text, it preserves white space and line breaks. So it will preserve my carriage returns. But notice it renders in a fixed font. It is a block level element. Notice we have a little bit of an indentation because of the code. This is the top, this is the bottom. And if you notice that I am indenting, that is just for me. I personally like to make my code easy for me to see and read. You're welcome to do whichever you like, and you will develop your own style eventually. So let's take a look at the block quote. And this is an excellent way of learning. Just get some content and start playing around with the tags or the elements. A block quote element is a block level element. It has about the same margin on the top and on the bottom as a paragraph does. Notice we do have the indentation on the left and on the right. So this is our block quote tag or element. You can pretty much use these words interchangeably, although technically an element is both the opening and closing tag. All right, address. oops, let me spell that right, the address element renders in italicized, oops, I did something wrong. Oh, I spelled it wrong. That's why that wasn't looking right. And notice, although it is a block level element, there is virtually no margin on the top and bottom. Although there is a carriage return. So the address tag is separated from what is on the top and what is on the bottom, but not by much. Now, once we start learning cascading style sheets, we will learn that we can adjust these margins using CSS. All right, let's take a look at lists. Here's my list, and I have, this is the top and this is the bottom. An unordered list is essentially for a bulleted list, similar to Microsoft Word. We start with the opening OL tag and the closing OL tag. Every item is an opening LI and a closing LI. So all of the content actually goes inside the closing and opening LI tags. Remember, we talked about two-sided tags. They either contain content or other HTML tags. So if I were to preview, here we see our list. It is indented. Excuse me, an OL is an ordered list. It's not bulleted. I stand corrected. I wasn't thinking of what I was saying. We have a margin on the top, a margin on the bottom. We have an indentation on the left. And actually, just like Microsoft Word, if this were to be a lot of information, it would wrap underneath the markers. So by default, an OL ordered, it means there's some kind of an ordering system, is numeric. We have the type attribute. If I wanted to have capital A, B, C, D, I can say type equals A. Now remember, in our first class we talked about some HTML elements have attributes. And this is the syntax. Attribute equals double quote value and double quote. Technically those quotes are optional, but I think it's a good programming habit to use them. So if I were to preview, I now have ABC. If I wanted to do uppercase Roman numerals, uppercase I, there we go. A lowercase I, is that lowercase? There we go. Or lowercase ABCD. Supposing I wanted to start 10 characters down, we have the start attribute. And it has to take a numeric value. So if I wanted to start after 10, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, there we go. We're starting at the 10th position, which would be letter J. Now notice we have two attributes. Attribute equals value, space. You put more spaces if you'd like. The more spaces, sometimes the easier to see. Attribute equals value. And by the way, when you notice I'm typing, sometimes you see a little sub-menu. That's the IntelliSense from the editor. Another nice feature about HTML editors. Okay, these attributes can be replaced with style sheets. So we do have an equivalent in CSS for, not the start, for the type, for using style sheets. So whenever you can, it is best to use style sheets as opposed to HTML attributes. Okay, let's take a look at the unordered list. Okay, that means there is no ordering. And this is our default bullets. Indentation from the left, margin on top, margin on the bottom. Now, if you wanted to change the marker, unfortunately, there is no type attribute in HTML5. There was in HTML4, but that is now deprecated. So we have to, we'll cover that later with style sheets. Okay, we can nest a list. All right, or I have a nested list. All right, here we go. There we go. Here we have a nested list. Okay, so remember, all of the content goes inside the opening and closing li tags. So if I wanted to subdivide apples into that there are 3 types, I can nest an entire list, and remember you have to have your opening and closing tags. And now I can have a nested list. And notice it defaults to a different type of marker. And sometimes the browser may interpret things a little differently. Okay, finally, let's take a look at our definition list. And a definition list uses 3 tags. We have our opening and closing DL definition list, our opening and closing DT, so we're defining a term, our opening and closing DD. And notice the way I am writing my code. This is my style. You can write it however you'd like. You can write it this way. All right, you can write it this way. Whichever works for you. Okay, I kind of like writing down, but if it's short, I'll write it across. Okay, so a definition list, let's take a look. Here we are. It is flush with the left, it's block level, margin on top, margin on bottom, but our DD element has the indentation. Okay, so these are some of the basic concepts that we're covering here in tutorial 1. We're looking at our HTML document. We're learning about the head section. We're learning about the body section. We're learning about our structural elements. And now we're adding some additional grouping elements. So as you work through the exercise in the textbook, you should start getting a feel for writing and testing your HTML code.